Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast, recording live from Austin, Texas. I am so glad to have in studio with me once again, SOC, Straight Outta Compton. Heather, how are you once again?
The sock is in the house.
The sock is in the house.
And also in the house, you just heard his voice. It is the velvety voice of Pastor Joseph Aiken III.
Does that mean I'm smooth?
That's beautiful.
Very
What is that?
smooth.
Is that velvet? That's beautiful.
What is that? What is this? Velvet?
It's nice.
Name that movie.
What movie is that?
You can, are you serious?
I'm blanking.
Oh. It's white people.
No! Nothing.
It's Eddie
What?
Murphy.
Oh, wow.
It's old.
Man.
It's beautiful. What is that? Is that velvet?
Oh, wait. That's when he plays all the characters. That's Coming to America.
There you go. Look
Gosh,
at you.
sorry about that. I had a moment of struggle. Sorry about that. Listen, I'm now really old.
Side note, Chris, you said something on Sunday. I didn't bring it up the last podcast about how you said
I used drip and extra.
Yeah,
Almost
but-
in the same sentence. Did I not use it right?
no, you didn't. you said his drip is on.
Drip.
Drip is always on or something. I said,
His drip is on and it's extra.
yeah, you said he's always extra. Every party, he's always. I was like, yeah,
Okay, all right,
The extra one was a little bit better.
All right,
Yeah.
the drip I wasn't doing so well.
See, you could have said, yeah.
His drip was looking good.
I mean, you would probably say he's dripping.
He's
with-
dripping. Okay.
With how you used it, you would feel
Right.
it.
Okay, dang it.
If
I'm
his
working
drip
on
was
it.
on, I was like,
And no, like his drip is on his
I did-
clothes that are really good or on.
I was thinking
fit.
about. I didn't teach
His
him
fit.
that.
Ah.
I did not teach.
His fit was
trying
extra.
to fit in urban
Yeah.
culture, okay?
It's wow.
Oh,
But
man.
hey, E for effort.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was
Notice I
kind of.
didn't
It was
say
good.
A,
Even effort. I was like, yeah, you got to practice it before.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
get it.
yeah. Listen, and I think it's good. You gotta, be vulnerable, stumble out in public. It's good. All right.
Yeah.
I do have a question for that came in a while ago, so I'm sorry that I'm only now getting to this. Because we get lots of questions here at Pastor Plek's podcast, and if you would like to join us, make sure you like, subscribe, and review our podcast, and then text us at 737-231-0605. And this question is pretty good. How do you balance praying for something in confidence, but also waiting on God's timing?
Ooh.
Now, have you ever had to do that?
Every
SOC?
day.
Yeah.
Every day.
So
When you own a business, especially when you own a business, there's a lot of that. You don't want to fail, and you want to succeed, and you want to make sure that you're doing everything, according to His will and things of that sort. I think a lot of people use, if it's your will, Lord, if it's your will. Of course, it's His will. It's always His will, but it's not what your belief of His will is for you sometimes. So,
Jesus did say, not my will, but your will be done. So not that it's, I'm just throwing that out there. Just saying, maybe when people pray that they're just trying to be like Jesus.
Bing bong. Just a little background. Little like, ding. Just saying.
Sound
Hashtag
effect.
just saying.
No, but that's good. I
Yeah.
think but I do feel like here's what I kind of appreciate it. Like if you're praying for God to heal cancer or something, you're like, God, I'm laying hands on somebody. And I think it's assumed it's God's will. But because sometimes I don't want a caveat. I don't want a like a disclaimer that God might not do something.
Right. But I think a lot of what you guys have preached recently has been very helpful in that. Like when you were talking about your mother, Pastor Joseph, and what she's going through, and how she said, either way, I win.
Yes.
And one of the things that I had a conversation with somebody about who lost someone to cancer, and they were very upset, and they said, we prayed so hard, for them to be healed. And my response was, well, who said that they weren't?
Right.
They are healed. They're healed. They're whole. There is no pain, so they did receive the healing. It just wasn't the healing you wanted
Right. And
for them. And I think that's what's so difficult is that, again, what is God's timeline? You know what I mean? And so I think that if what you're praying for is not happening, doors aren't opening, there aren't pathways set before you that suddenly become like, wow, this is really happening. I think that there's a reason for this season. and that it needs to be a different type of prayer of, help me to understand, the silence, help me to understand why, we're at a standstill, or if this is not where I need to be going, can you direct me to what I need to be doing right now in the meantime, instead of constantly praying for the one thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think to that end, I really appreciate that thought, because one of the things I've said, I think we spend more time praying sick people out of heaven
Right,
than
that was the other
healthy
thing
people
that
out of
really
hell.
stuck with me that you said. I was just like, oh man, that was a gut punch, but it's so factual.
Because and listen, I'm not saying it's wrong to pray for sick people to be healed. I mean, clearly God calls us to pray over the sick. That's not even, it's like you're commanded to do it. Mm-hmm. So we're supposed to pray over the sick. I think the problem comes when God doesn't answer that, that we need to be rejoicing, especially if that person knew Jesus. And I think that's the part that I feel like we forget, is that the pain that we feel is ours, not theirs.
Right.
So it's a selfish
pain. Right.
Yeah. When the pain is selfish, I think that's fair for us to. So we need to grieve, and this is what's so cool about this. God always has a place. Blessed are those who mourn, for you will be. This is a promise of God. You will be comforted. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to really rest in that. And again, I'm not wishing death on anyone, but there has to be a hope that, Jesus, you've got this, and I trust you in this. And my hope for you is that no matter what the circumstance, that is happening, that you are better than any circumstance I'm facing.
What do you think, Pastor Joseph?
That's good. So even with what Chris just finished saying, it's so easy to allow circumstance, thinking about the question, but to allow circumstance to determine proximity to God. And so how do you balance between the two of things, what's going on in your life, of like, man, I'm praying real hard for this thing I want it to happen, but it's not happening. I'm trying to wait on God's time, but God, your timing isn't aligning with my timing.
Right.
I mean, you just gotta stay close to God in every season, because if the only time you're close to God is when you want when you're wanting something, then you're missing out on, like,
or God will give you a lot of wanting.
Yeah.
That keeps you close.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Like for me personally, it's staying in my word. I mean, just reading through stories of people who went through those things, and, oh, okay, this is how it's handled. Just allowing God to speak to me and listening, just meditating on Him, saying, okay, God, what do you want me to do in this situation? Because it's easy to want to rush the things that I have desire. Like there's places and time. There's a timing that I have in my mind for me to plant a church, for example. This is just something that's actively on my mind. It's like every day I'm constantly praying about. Okay, God, I know I got to be patient, but I'm ready to go. Like I just met somebody, another person. They said, "Man, Joe, when you plant your church, I'm coming." Like, come now, like, and so it's just being in prayer, trusting God's plan, trusting His time, and if you believe like that trust, then it'll allow you to say, "Okay, I can be patient. I can wait a little bit longer."
It reminds me of my daughter. We have what I think it's called Greenlight. It's a bank account that she, you know what I mean? And she has money in that account, right? And so she wants to go get something. Sometimes she'll be like, "I want to go get this now," and I'm like, okay. And then we get somewhere and she's like, well, I want that. I'm like, well, you don't have enough money for that. She's like, but I want to get it now. And I'm like, well, you can't have it now. You don't have the money for that. And so I think it's like, well, then you can accept having this smaller thing. If you're going to force the issue, you're negating the bigger blessing at the end of it. It is one way I look at it.
Yeah, and it's not that He's not preparing the bigger blessing. He's preparing you for that bigger blessing. Right. So when you understand that he already went ahead of us, prepared that place, and now this journey is that preparation till you get there.
Yeah, when you look at your children, you think of, what can you handle? If I give you like a really nice something, we all know the reason why we don't have nice things in our house is because you break them.
This is why we can't have nice things.
All right. And so therefore, I'm not going to be stupid and a fool and buy you something really nice that you will not value until you're ready for it. And I think for us in our Christian maturity, there's something that God, in whether it's in ministry or marriage or money, or I guess look at that. Look at those M's.
M's.
Yeah, ministry, money, and marriage. Give me another M. Whatever. All the M's that you're wanting to experience. If God gave you that too soon, you might not handle it well. And so the Lord might be preparing you to receive it. And that's always what God has at least been doing with my heart, has been preparing me to receive it. And so when I look back at the history of my calling, of God's working in my life, I see the way he has operated, and I'm so grateful. There were times where I was like, why can't I just do this now? And I'm like, oh, because I was not ready. And I'm so grateful for that. So I feel like that's part of it. There's a second part of this question that I thought was interesting. It said, part of me, this is the question, part of me feels like it would be borderline disrespectful to ask or demand things of God the way we see happening in the Old Testament scripture. On the flip side, you could also argue that we're limiting our understanding of God's power by not asking for great things. He created the freaking world with his words and conquered death. Why would I not be asking in confidence, knowing that he can give it to me? If he can conquer death, why do I think he can't answer prayer in the way I want? In a nutshell, how do you balance fear and respect for God with trusting that your God is great, wants to give us big things?
Can I go back to the first part of that question and then just get clarification from you guys? Because again, I'm not a Bible scholar. But he said, she said, in regards to the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. So what do they mean by that, you think, when they say asking in regards to...
So remember how, one just popped in my head, Abraham praying for the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. Hey, Lord, don't kill them. Don't blow up the city if you can find 10 righteous people. All right, for 10 righteous people. Like he has that. Or how about Moses saying, God, based on your fame, your glory, do not blot out these people, but spare them and save them for the fame of your great name. Okay. So something along those lines where it's more demanded sounding to save a people.
Okay. I was just trying to understand the difference between asking in the Old Testament and asking in the New Testament.
I think what you see, and I think specifically with Jesus, there's a lot of your will be done prayer. It's all about your will be done on earth as in heaven. It's very much that the Lord's Prayer has a your will aspect, which I think you would say it's always God's will. And even in the Psalm, this is where Psalm 37:4, and I'm making stuff up. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart.
Right.
Okay. So I feel like that's sort of what the New Testament prayer is. If I delight in your will, then I pray for your will, then your will is going to happen. And perhaps that's like God be glorified in whatever this circumstance is. And it's really like, God, help me recognize that you're being glorified in whatever this is.
So do you think that there's ever a time that's disrespectful, Pastor Joseph, to ask, like, based off that question that this person is asking? I don't understand that. To me, like, I don't think
you can ask and be disrespectful when you're asking.
I guess, because I don't view, like, when I talk to God just like I feel like God's there. You know what I mean? Like I'm having a conversation.
Do you think your kids ever ask you disrespectfully?
Oh, snaps. Okay, well, now if we're putting it that way, I will rip your lips off.
I mean, that helps when you think contextual, like when you kind of place it in that context.
Anyway,
especially if God is if you've already told your child something and they keep asking, then it becomes disrespectful.
Right.
And like, so I know that Titus, we already said no, stop asking.
Yeah, but isn't there ever that opportunity where sometimes they ask the right way and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
So.
Sure.
So then I try to think, my kids give great examples of being married. One of those two I can find, like, oh, okay, this is what, with the disrespect. Yeah, I can ask disrespectfully, but because the kids don't understand the value, they don't understand the sacrifice Chris talked about. Like they may not be ready. And I think even with that part, that sometimes you just don't get it. And it's not a not ready just because God doesn't want you to have it. It's like John the Baptist. He probably could have pastored a mega church, been, maybe, but that's not what God wanted for him. And so maybe God just doesn't want that for you.
Right.
And so yes, I do think you can ask disrespectfully, because you're asking in your will and not God's will. And so that whole, when my thoughts become what God wants for me, then I begin to ask and operate. Oh, this isn't for me. I don't get any glory in this. This isn't me getting lifted up. I understand that it's not about me. And so when I want it to be about me and the things that I want, and I believe God, for me personally, there's a conviction there of, man, why do I want to plant the church? Why do I want to grow? Because all the people that said I couldn't, or because of this, do I think I'd be good? Yeah, I'd be good. Let's do it now. Man, I got all these people saying they roll with me. So all these minds are constantly clouding, like going into my head. Is like, and then I have to separate myself and say, okay, God, what do you want? And then he'll says, not now. I'm like, oh, okay. You know.
Right.
So yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. One of my favorite verses that I got on my pastor retreat, Walkabout with Jesus.
Your sojourn with the Lord.
Yeah. Isaiah 30, verse 18. And the ESV is not as good as the NIV on this translation. Not that it's not true, but I just like the NIV's better. But the ESV says, therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. Where the NIV says, therefore the Lord longs to be gracious to you. And I kind of really I love that translation because I think it's really more what it means. The word is wait. It is clearly wait. But the meaning is the Lord's waiting to be gracious to you because he wants to bless you. He wants to, for people shall dwell in Zion, in Jerusalem you shall weep no more. He wants to, he will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. As soon as he hears it, he answers you, which you're like, well, the answer is not coming through. And but if we
There's a bad connection.
yeah, there's a bad connection. I feel like the part for me that was really a blessing in that is the Lord wants to bless me. And so the thing that's hindering him is me. No, the Lord wants to bless me. And the reason why he is not is I'm not ready to receive it. And this is where I love James chapter 1, verses 2 through 8. You know, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Okay, that's the part of like the trial part. But if any of you lacks wisdom, this is verse 5, but if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask of God who gives generously without finding fault, and it will be given to him. When you don't know the answer to something, God's ready to give you the answer. That the weird part though, verses 6 through 8 is, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, for he who doubts like a wave of the sea blown tossed by the wind, that man should not think you receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. In other words, God's giving you an answer. The problem is you don't want to hear it.
Right. That's good.
And I feel like that's what happens to us a lot when God gives us a specific answer. And, you know, the answer is going to be yes, no, wait, or change, right? Like those are basically the four. And so the Lord will tell you why. You just got to, or he might not tell you why, and you have to wait and just trust him. Like a 3-year-old with a daddy, like you don't understand why you can't cross the street and play in the street because it's way more fun and your bike rides better there.
And
but
sometimes he's wanting you to get into his word and get some knowledge on it, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Because it's like,
Sure.
go ahead.
There's
No,
a lot of-
I love when Pastor Joseph leans forward, I'm like, oh, hold up.
So Chris, for you, you can help answer this too. But I know more specifically when I think of Chris, because you're your own business owner, so it's like you don't have to wait on anyone to do. It's like, hey, if we want to do something, we're gonna do
But
it.
we do. But anyway.
Oh, well, you can. You have something to say in it too. So my thought is, so thinking about this question, where it's like, hey, I'm waiting on the Lord, but I feel like the next part is I'm waiting on man to get out of the way, or it's like I have to submit to someone. And so, at what point during this prayer do I say, okay, God, I know you said this. Do I move or do I wait on them, people, man? Like, I feel strongly about this passion, this conviction you put in me, but I want to be obedient. I feel like they're not doing. Like, how would you talk to someone that says, hey?
Yeah, for me specifically, when I was, I felt called to be a pastor. And there was a couple things in the way of that. One was me. I wasn't married. And so I was like, I knew that I couldn't start pastoring until I was married because I didn't even want to even touch a church as a single person because I had disaster for me personally written all over it. Okay. So then I got married, and then I realized that being a pastor is actually a hard thing to do. It's like a privilege that you just don't go like, hey, I'm ready to be a pastor. And like church doors open wide and you walk in and you start preaching. I didn't realize how that worked. And so it was a lot of prayer for me, for God to open up the door. And so you're always waiting on the Lord. But then in retrospect, looking back on my life, it was really fun to do. It was to look back at how the Lord answered prayer after prayer after prayer and took the longing of my heart and then put it into practice. I think that was what was really a beautiful thing, and it really forced me to trust him. And then all of a sudden, now looking back on my life and seeing how God operated, I'm now really confident that the Lord is going to do things without me even, like, stuff came out of nowhere. Like, stuff literally came out of nowhere in my life. Like, my seminary got paid for sort of out of nowhere. Me becoming the pastor of this church kind of came out of nowhere. We got land for this church sort of like out of nowhere. I mean, a lot of the stuff happened that I was sitting there going like, I really feel like we need this thing and blah, blah, blah. And then at some point I go, you know what? I'm content with whatever. I'm ready to just do whatever God wants me to do. And then God moved it along. I think it's believing that if God has put something in your heart, if you have to manipulate your way or work your way, and it doesn't, just the thrust of it doesn't happen in the Lord's timing, then you're going to force it, manipulate it, and it's going to be a little bit painful. And I've experienced that too. So no doubt. I think it comes back to, do you believe, especially when it comes to business, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to marriage, again, all the M's, back to ministry, money, and marriage, and managing stuff. You have to trust God that if he's put it on your heart for it to happen, he's also going to fulfill it himself.
Right. I think you both have good examples right now of kind of this question, in a sense, is, like where we are with the land and the, building, that there's these, because we get messages every now and then that come out that say, hey, make sure that you're praying for the church because this has been delayed, and this, you know what I mean? Yep. So that's a good example. I think.
It's a
also with you planting your church, I think, I think it's good for people to know, because people, I think, sometimes look at pastors and just go, oh, they're so blessed because they talk to God and God talks to them. And it's just this. And I'm like, no, I'm looking at two pastors right now that have very large, hurry up and wait situations, and I think it's good for parishioners and everybody to know that, these questions that you're asking are very applicable to, not just us, the plebes or whatever, but also, to people in positions of, spiritual authority, et cetera, or whatever you want to say. Nobody's exempt from this question that they're asking right now. And so, that's a difficult question, but
yeah, the question I ask myself whenever things aren't happening at the speed of time is like, what are you trying to teach me right now?
Right.
And I have to go back to that mindset, because that has been really helpful as I look back on my ministry and just, 10 years as a pastor. I'm like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff that I wasn't ready for 10 years ago that, it's not even a thing now. Like, what I thought would be like, oh, that's crazy. And now it's like, yeah, that makes sense. It just, I don't even know how to describe that. Like building stuff.
I tell myself there's a reason for this season. And that's what I just say to myself repeatedly. Okay, there's a reason for this season. When it's difficult, there's a reason for this season. And I don't try to, why is the reason? I just, when it's hard, there's so many stories biblically that I look at people and go, well, at least I'm not Job. You know what I mean? Or at least I'm not, these people went through these incredible, crazy tests, and there were stories written of praise from prisons. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, is it really that bad right now? Here's somebody that had the worst of the worst, and they were like, nope, God's good all the time.
All the time. Okay, I think we hammered that out. Any other thoughts on that, Joseph?
I have other thoughts.
What are your other thoughts? Hit me.
Well, part of it, so you answered, I think, part of the question for me.
Okay.
What I was asking. I was saying, so one of the things you said in your answer is like, when things aren't happening like as fast as you want them, but what if things have been a long time? And it's like, man, someone maybe doesn't want to release, like if I'm working a job, it's like, you just gotta be patient. I don't want you to think that I'm not moving or I'm not working, for that person feeling like, man, I've been stuck in the same place. It hasn't been a week or two. It's been a year, 10 years or something. Someone's just like, man, I feel God calling me this, but I feel like there's someone that doesn't want to release more. There's something in the way, and that God's like, he's calling me to do more work. But there's this thing in the way. Do I just move it out the way? Or is that me forcing, trying to manipulate?
That's what, at least from my perspective.
Strike them down, Lord. No.
Yeah, no, because if God is in control,
right,
and there's something that's prohibiting you, then God's got to move it. It reminds me of David with King Saul. Like he was literally called to be the king, anointed to be the king. And then when there's all these opportunities for David to go and kill off Saul, but he never takes it because he wants to operate within the authority that God has given him. And so now if it's like, it could be like a fear that you have about not moving forward in something that you're like, there's actually no resistance and you're afraid of nothing. But if God has put some authority in your life that you are saying, hey, that's the authority of my life and that's where the Lord's counsel and all that, then I would honor that because I feel like God can move anything he wants whenever he wants. And if he hasn't moved it, that means he doesn't want to. And I think that's what's challenging, I think, for Christians to really lean into, right, is we want things to happen yesterday. And how do I know? Well, if God has placed something as an obstacle, just where my kids, I can be an impenetrable wall, but when they really want something and I see that they're working hard in loving the family and not being selfish turds, then I'm more able to like bless them with things as opposed to like, you're always fighting. Why? Stop it. So, you're ready for the next thing and I can see that as a dad. And so I kind of look at it from that point when I think business, when I think, I want to start this thing, or I want to go out on my own. But there's this thing holding me back or whatever. I feel like you've got to let the Lord work that out, or else you'll always be resentful. And if you don't, one of the things I've had to do, because I submit to elders, and so sometimes elders don't move at my pace. And what I've had to realize, like when things don't go the way I want, it's like, oh, that was not me that wasn't people telling me no, that was God telling me no. And that was really sort of like, okay. And then that's when I go, I guess that's part of being under authority, is that when someone tells me no, and this probably only really fits for church people, but when, when elders tell me no, then I don't take that as that person doesn't like me or that person is against me, which they may well be, but I can't take it like that. I have to say, oh, that's the Lord saying you're not ready for whatever the next thing is. And there have been times where I felt like, oh my gosh, the elders are missing it because we should have done this thing. And then we don't. And then I'm like, oh, looks like God was in control of that the whole time.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, don't want to keep...
You don't want to belabor? Well, we can make this whole podcast about it. Go for it. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm thinking David, and you talked about Saul, just the many moments of he had opportunities to kill Saul. And then I think about even before that, when it was like, hey, David, when he defeated Goliath. Right. And it's like, oh, you all are afraid to step out. You're afraid to let go. In my mind, he said, I'll do this. Let me kill this uncircumcised Philistine. And so I just think of moments like that where he wanted to operate from the strength, the purpose that God had put in him. Yeah. And so I think about that story where it's like, okay, this is a situation, same person earlier in his life where he stepped out in faith. Like no one, like everyone else being scared or everyone, whatever it was in that situation. I think, oh, well, with a situation like just talk about with Christians, why is it that we have to wait for those instead of just saying, hey, I'm gonna step out.
What I love that story about with Dave is they still wanted the authority of Saul. He said they brought him to, which is sort of weird, right? Why wouldn't he just run out there in the battlefield and kill him? I'm not sure why he needed the king's authority, but he did. He goes to King Saul. Saul gives him his armor. He's like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. He's like, all right, well, go with God. And then he picks up the rocks and kills Goliath. So I still feel like if something isn't happening, it's because God doesn't want it to happen. And if it does happen, then God is allowed. I think this is always what's challenging, right? You can only know God's will. This was so hard. Based on what's been done. Like you can look back and see how the Lord weaved that, and then you go, that's when I was impatient right there, and then I hit this really bumpy spot, and then God opened the door later. I think that's, at least for me, in the moment, you're always gonna be wrestling with, is this the will of the Lord? Should I be moving forward with that, or should I wait? And I think that's what's really challenging. So unless you really have some clear this is what for men. This is what's always challenging, right? So you're having to lead your family, and when you're doing that, you might have your wife saying, "Here's the 800 things we should do," and you're like, you want to love and serve her, but you're like, and then you've got spiritual leaders in your life say, "Hey, this is probably the direction," and you're taking counsel, but then eventually you got to move forward and make a decision. But some things are sometimes not, like for me, this is where I almost feel like it's cheating. In my life, on the big things, I have a whole elder board that I have to get approval from. So it's like, it's almost like a clear sign from God on stuff. So it's like, I can't just do whatever I want. So there's almost like a freedom in that. But yeah, I think it's a difficult thing to make decisions and move forward when you have a bunch of advice and counsel going all sorts of directions. But ultimately, you have to trust the Lord and walk in the Lord, especially if there isn't a direct authority, in your life. That can be a little bit challenging.
I think that's good. Don't look at me. This makes it awkward. This is just a really brilliant question. I mean, there's so many levels to this question.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Okay, awesome.
It's good.
All right.
Hopefully we answered it.
Yeah,
to some extent.
To some extent, I think this one could go back and forth for forever. And I do okay on that. That's why I do love "If it's your will, Lord." That's in Jesus' prayer. If it's your will, I'm ready to do whatever. There's two times where you sort of see that. It's in Luke 22 with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then it's 2 Corinthians 12 with Paul and the thorn. And I think in both cases, it's you're asking God to, the great thing about the thorn in the flesh, who knows what that was? Was it a person? Was it a desire? Was it a whatever? Who knows? And it's like you're asking the Lord that like God can move anything. And I think the hard part is sometimes the reason why you haven't done it is you haven't stepped forward in faith and done what God's already called you to do. Right. So anyway, all right, move forward. Here's the next question. I've got. Okay, let's go back to David and Goliath for a second. Why in 1 Samuel 16 Saul has David enter the service of playing music for Saul? And then in 1 Samuel 17, after David kills Goliath, Saul doesn't recognize him. Bum, bum, bum.
Oh, there's many reasons that could be. It could be he was just the harp player, whatever.
Right.
That was his only job, and Saul could have not known him. I mean, this is the king of his nation, so it's like, yes, I know everything about the harp player that's playing music. Or chronologically, right. That could have happened, where he didn't know him, so that couldn't have been lined up there. And I think there's even the idea of when he asked him that, it was to give him his reward to the father and all those different things. And so there's many reasons.
Yeah, I like that one. Who is his father? I'm gonna go reward him. Whose son is he? Yeah, I like that. There's probably and it could also, I'm not gonna say that there was an error, but maybe that part was written in and they slapped it in there. Oh gosh, we forgot this part, and they put it in there, and it just didn't make sense. I don't know. It doesn't make it any less God's word. It just, the chronology of it is a little odd.
I kind of like that basis. It's like if you're a king, there's a lot going on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But also, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this, but he wasn't, to me, a full sound mind all the time either. Right? Because you're chucking spears at somebody playing a harp for you. That, to me, would be a sign of mental illness. So, that could very well be that, you're not recognizing somebody because you're not really all there all the time. There's a lot to that, but that's the way I look at it. I'm like, you don't just throw, that's some fortitude where you're just bobbing and weaving, little Heisman action, keep playing that harp while somebody is throwing spears at you, It's like, oh, he doesn't mean it.
Oh man, I love it. Okay, yeah. So I want to read the scripture where he says it, because I feel like this is it's. Let me see if I can find it. It's 1 Samuel 17. Okay. Now, as Saul watched David going out to fight the Philistine, he asked Abner, the general in command of the army, whose son is that young man, Abner? Whose son is that young man, Abner? Abner replied, as surely as you live, O king, I don't know. And then the king said, find out whose son this boy is. And so, again, it could be that he knew who he was, but he really didn't know who the father was, which I like that because that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be thrown off by there's a lot of dudes around. He's like, that guy looks sort of familiar, but I haven't seen him in a fighting garb. He just saw him as the good looking kid that sits over there in the corner. And yeah, so it is a little challenging to kind of figure out how to wrap that out. But yeah, any other thoughts on that one?
The only reason I would think he would know him, David himself, is he was the harp player. He just didn't know his daddy. I like that. Dude. I mean,
I like that.
And he's not a little, to me. I mean, you go really into it. He's not a little dude. He stands out because he has to be as big as Saul, who Saul is said was a head above everyone else. So if he's gonna let him try on his armor, he gotta be as big as him, So
yeah, well, the armor thing might not be the dead giveaway because it doesn't.
I know
fit
that.
him.
Yeah.
But at least you're like, well, yeah, I'd be weird. Like, who knows? And it could have been the armor with strap on like the arms or on the chest or whatever because it's male of some sort. I don't know. That's a interesting thought on that one.
No, I'm just thinking about it now as I think. Yeah, why would? So maybe he just didn't know who the pappy was and he just wanted to give him the prize.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I think that's whose son is that?
Good call.
Okay. All right. Well, that is going to be a wrap on today's show. I'm so glad that every one of you have been listening. Make sure you like, you subscribe, you review, you tell a friend about Pastor Plek's podcast so that we can get more of your questions in and we can get the reach and expanse. We can reach more people with the message we got here, which is that Jesus loves them very much. And we want to help you grow in your faith as we talk faith, culture, and everything in between. So until we meet again, go and have an awesome week of worship.